Magabanan, folks. It is I, once again, Kamal, your friendly neighborhood integral solver, here to solve some not-so-friendly looking integrals. And today we have an absolute banger of an integral, but before that, I apologize. I am terribly sorry for my prolonged absence. I was terribly occupied with schoolwork and work. Both have been pretty crazy recently. Once again, terribly sorry about that. But we have quite an interesting looking integral over here. We have an integral that would make Lobachevsky fanboys quite happy. I mean, they would jump at the sight of sine x over x, but we have a log of 1 plus x squared term next to it, which immediately kills their hopes and dreams. I am sorry, Lobachevsky fanboys. But every Lobachevsky fanboy is also a Feynman fanboy. So why not define an integral function I of a parameter alpha, terribly sorry about that, as the integral from 0 to infinity of sine x over x times the logarithm of 1 plus alpha squared x squared. And the reason why I'm placing the parameter into the logarithm is that if I plug in alpha equal to 0, I very conveniently have the integral from 0 to infinity of sine x over x times the logarithm of 1, which of course equals 0. So that means I of 0 is 0, which is a very useful initial value type condition that of course will be invaluable later during our solution development. So as always, the idea is to differentiate this thing with respect to the alpha parameter. So that yields I prime of alpha equal to the integral from 0 to infinity of now the partial derivative with respect to alpha of sine x over x times log of 1 plus alpha squared x squared dx. Now, of course, the sine x over x term is independent of the alpha parameter. So we'll write this as integral 0 to infinity sine x over x, and differentiating the logarithm yields 1 plus alpha squared x squared. And of course, on differentiation, we have 2 alpha x squared dx. One of the x terms cancels out, and the result is 2a times the integral from 0 to infinity. Let's see, we have x times sine x over 1 plus alpha squared x squared dx. That does indeed look dope, but we can do one better if we introduce a transformation. That is, if we let's see, I'd like alpha x here equal to u, which implies that dx is equal to 1 over alpha du. And of course, if I'm placing alpha to be a non-negative parameter, so that means I prime of alpha sorts out to 2 alpha times the integral from 0 to infinity. And we have, what exactly? Oh yeah, x is u over alpha, and then we have sine of u over alpha. And then we have a 1 plus u squared term over there. Why am I writing a du over there? Maybe it's because I'm thinking about the du term, but I'm not writing fast enough. I gotta write faster. But then again, my handwriting is already atrocious. I'm overthinking it now. The point is that we have this 1 over alpha du term, and one of the alphas can be cancelled out, but you're still left with an 1 over alpha terms, so that means I have 2 over alpha integral terribly. Sorry about that. 0 to infinity of sine of u over alpha over 1 plus u squared. Oh wait, I forgot a u term there. Du. And this looks like an integral that could be solved quite nicely using some complex analysis. Now, via Euler's formula, we know that sine of x is equal to the imaginary part of e to the ix. So what we need is the imaginary part of sine of x over alpha, or in our case, we're defining the complex valued function f of z as z times e to the I z over alpha over 1 plus z squared. And now we need a suitable contour. So I think it's a no-brainer that we should be making use of the semicircular contour in the contour. What the hell is a contour? Semicircular contour in the upper half of the complex plane. So let me just draw some kind of, straight line representing the diameter of the circle. And then we have this semicircular arc. Radius is r, so I got a negative r over there and r over there. And of course, I only see one pole of the function up top in that half of the complex plane, and that is for z here equal to I. Okay, cool. I'll call the semicircular arc gamma, and the entire thing could be called C or whatever. So the integral over our closed contour C, or whatever the contour's name, of f by Cauchy's residue theorem is equal to 2 pi I times the sum of the residues of f of z enclosed by our contour. Okay, cool. And we only have one residue to calculate, and that is because of the pole at z equal to I. And the integral can be broken down into an integral over the diameter. That is to say, the integral from negative r to r. Terribly sorry about that. That was a bit more cursive even for my liking. The integral from negative r to r, and of course on the real line, z can be parameterized as just being equal to x. So that means I have x times e to the I x over alpha over 1 plus x squared dx. That looks a lot like our target integral. And the good news is it is our target integral, as we will see later. In fact, it's just a bit more than our target integral. And of course, we have the integral over gamma of f, and the result is 2 pi I times the residue of f at, terribly sorry about that, the residue of f at z equal to I, which is exactly what we need to calculate right now. Now, because z equal to I is a simple pole of our function, the calculation is pretty straightforward. So we do know that the residue of f at z equal to I will be given by the limit as z approaches I of z minus I times our function, that is z times e to the I z over alpha over, we had a 1 plus z squared, right? So that's just a z minus alpha over a z plus alpha term. And we can, of course, introduce some cancellation. And as z tends to I, we have I times e to the I squared over alpha over 2I, and the i's cancel out further quite nicely, and we are left with e to the negative 1 over alpha over 2. Okay, cool. So that's the residue of f of z at z equals I, where I have switched notation midway, but that's perfectly all right. And it can be shown via Jordan's lemma that the integral over gamma in the limit as r tends to infinity does crash to 0. Terribly sorry about that. I've forgotten completely how to write 0. And I should mention that we are interested in r tending to infinity. Okay, cool. So that means our result is the integral from negative infinity to infinity of x times e to the I x over alpha over 1 plus x squared dx equal to 2 pi I times our residue, which is of course e to the negative 1 over alpha over 2. There's some lovely cancellation taking place, so we have pi I times e to the negative 1 over alpha. Okay, cool. And we can now separate this into real and imaginary parts, and we see that the integral over the real line of x times cosine of x over alpha over 1 plus x squared is equal to 0, because the real part of the right-hand side is, of course, 0, and I think that's pretty easy to see, given that cosine is an even function, but x is an odd function. So we're integrating this thing over a symmetric interval, and we should get a 0. And of course, we have the integral over r of x times sine of x over alpha. Terribly sorry about that. Over, wait, just for symmetry above. That's just my OCD kicking in. Dx equals what exactly? Oh yeah, that's pi times e to the negative 1 over alpha. Okay, cool. And of course, our target integral, recall, was the integral from 0 to infinity. And because the numerator is a product of two odd functions, it's an even function. 1 over 1 plus x squared is also an even function. So this implies that I prime of alpha is in fact equal to pi over 2 times e to the negative 1 over alpha. And now the objective is to recover back the integral function. Well, actually, I may have forgotten something. And that is a factor. I've forgotten the factor of 2 over alpha, if I am not mistaken. Yes, indeed, this is the factor of 2 over alpha. So let me just write it over here, 2 over alpha. The 2's cancel out, and we are left with a fascinating looking structure that is e to the negative 1 over alpha. Why am I reintroducing the complex, the imaginary unit that is? So we have this exponential term over alpha equal to I prime of alpha, and we now need to integrate with respect to alpha in order to recover back the integral function. So this implies that I of alpha is equal to pi times the integral of e to the negative 1 over alpha d alpha, which looks very strange indeed. So we're going to let 1 over alpha here equal to... I mean, I've never introduced a beta parameter unless it was already with an alpha, so let's introduce it as the dummy variable of integration. So this implies that alpha equals 1 over beta, which further implies that d alpha equals negative 1 over beta squared d beta. Okay, cool. So I of alpha, which is now I of beta, but you know what? Why the hell not? Equals pi times the integral of what exactly? Oh yeah, we have a negative sign outside now. We have e to the negative beta over alpha is 1 over beta, but we have a 1 over beta squared d beta term here, so one of them has to go, and we have negative pi times the integral, terribly sorry about that, of e to the negative beta over beta d beta. And most of you will recognize this as the error function, and for a strange reason that I really should cover, once you plug this thing into Wolfram Alpha, I mean as an indefinite integral, it gives you the exponential integral, but with a negative argument. That is to say, you will have negative pi times e sub I of negative beta. Okay, cool, plus some constant of integration c. Now, of course, we had I of alpha, so let me revert back to the alpha realm, and we have e sub I of negative 1 over alpha plus c. So that is I of alpha, but of course we are interested in the constant of integration, so let me revert back to the definition of the exponential integral. So e sub I of some parameter x, let's say, equals the negative of the integral from negative x to infinity of e to the minus t over t dt. So this implies that e sub I of negative 1 over alpha is equal to the integral from where to where exactly? Oh yeah, 1 over alpha to infinity. And we still have a negative sign, e to the minus t over t dt. And recall we had this useful initial condition that I of 0 is equal to 0, so we'll take the limit of e sub I of negative 1 over alpha as alpha tends to 0 from the right of negative... Now, when 1 over alpha, as alpha tends to 0, 1 over alpha will tend to infinity because alpha is tending to 0 from the right. So we have integral from infinity to infinity of e to the minus t over t dt, which I know looks super weird. But if we write this as the integral from, let's say, some y to y, as y tends to infinity, we have e to the minus t over t dt. I'm forgetting a negative sign, but who cares, because this integral is always going to be equal to 0, and the result is a big fat 0. Okay, cool. So this implies that 0 equals 0 plus c. In other words, the constant of integration is 0, and this implies that I of alpha is indeed equal to negative pi times e sub I of negative 1 over alpha. And of course, letting alpha equal to 1 for our target case yields the target integral I equal to negative pi times e sub I of negative 1, which is, of course, confirmed via a quick check on Wolfram Alpha. I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you. See you next time.